Hi, Kris. It's nice to meet you.
You too, Ashley.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk about Wild Robot today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
I'm a big fan of yours. I think all of your scores hit for me, so this is great.
Uh,
Um, you took Haunted Mansion, which is one of my all-time favorite Disney rides, and you just you did that. And Secret Invasion had some issues, but the score was not one of them. So
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
yeah. And now we have the Wild Robot, which I come from a music background, so I've always appreciated how scores move and elevate the emotions and the stories of the film. And I have to say, with all love, you did the most. And I mean that, like I said, with love, but man, you had me and everybody in my like peripherals like feeling all of the feels of this film.
Thanks so much.
It was a wild ride. And I remember during the press conference before the film came out, you mentioning that you became a father during the process of creating the score. And as a parent myself, I just would love to hear how you took all of those because there's so many when they hand that baby to you for the first time. There's so many emotions that go with that, and how you channeled that into the film.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, thanks for that. As you know, I feel like those experiences and feelings are so difficult to articulate in words, and I find that I actually feel like that's the beauty of art in so many ways is that it captures these things that we can't really say in words, but somehow it like translates a feeling that people can feel. And so that's in a lot of ways why I'm even a musician, is because I relied on the piano to express and work through emotions and discover emotions. So I actually feel like it's maybe even more than speaking my most clearest form of communication. So in terms of finding it, it's honestly just a lot of watching this beautiful film and like, after I read the book and like thinking about the story and the themes that are there, and it already sparks so many involuntary emotions and so many things that are coming up for me and in those early days of being a parent, that I often would just go to the piano and just think about those things and just improvise until I happened upon something that felt like it struck a chord emotionally. And then it was just trusting that process where I would find that involuntary visceral reaction, and then I would build on that and then put it up against the picture and see how that felt, and doing that over and over again throughout the course of the movie is, following the emotion.
Are there any pieces of the music that you felt you especially composed for where you're sitting there like, this is for my baby?
Yeah, I think the migration sequence, the main theme of the movie, the first version of it that I wrote for that sequence is called "I Could Use a Boost." And what's so interesting is that the way that it happened, I decided to write that as the first theme I wanted to write because it would be something that I could use as I continued to score the film, just in terms of like having a melody that now I know I can continue to reorchestrate and reharmonize and work throughout the film. But I responded the most emotionally to the pencil sketch version of that sequence. Like even before it looked as beautiful as that shot behind you, there's something about that moment that felt so clear to me. And I think it's Chris says it really well, Chris Sanders, where he said that up until this point, Roz didn't realize that she's been like hurtling toward this emotional cliff, having to say goodbye to Bright Bill. And like so much of being a parent is like you are doing so much and getting so emotionally invested in all these things, just at some point like let this human go off and be themselves and trust the world with them in so many different stages. And so thinking about all that, I it's funny because the first version I wrote, I thought about sending my daughter off to college, and I shared the piece of music with Chris, and it wasn't the right feeling. And a lot of it was because I was imagining that moment in a very sweet and innocent way, and like, us waving at each other and like little like cute winks and smiles as she went off to college and all this stuff, and didn't think about the complexity of what's happening with Roz and Brightbill in that moment. And thinking about that on a deeper level and parenthood on a deeper level of like, you know, the complexities of like no matter how hard I try, I'm gonna let her down in certain ways. And like I'm even in these couple of years, already having moments of failing as a parent and like figuring out how to accept that about myself and forgive myself and hoping that, anything that she feels that she can forgive about me, like all of those kind of therapeutic thoughts of parenthood, I think really fed into writing that main theme and writing that cue. And so much of it was thinking about Coda, my daughter.
I feel all of that because mine are older, but yeah, it's a lot. And those feelings just there's so much going on. Um, so you kind of talked about it a little bit, but what was the collaboration process like between you and Kris? Were you getting like updates when they were working on animation, or just was it all like rough pencil sketches as you were working on the score?
Yeah, we get updates pretty much like I'd say every couple of months. Essentially, they'd send me a new cut, but we work together every week for the almost 2 years that we worked together. And toward the end, it was a few times a week. And he would come into my studio here and sit right next to me, and I'd work on cues, or I'd play him a cue. And then the great thing about it is it really reminded me of the collaborations that I fell in love with when I was a kid, when I saw videos of John Williams and Steven Spielberg sitting next to each other, and John playing piano and singing a theme, and telling him which instrument's going to play that theme, and Steven responding to that. And it's the same thing here with Kris, where I'd play him that sequence, and then he'd be like, okay, well, like, what's happening here? And I'd be like, okay, well, the strings are doing this and the brass are doing this. And he'd be like, okay, well, the brass is really nice. Can we like thin out those strings a little bit? And I'd change it right in front of him. And like, it was this collaborative process where he was just so excited and very engaged, but never in a like intense way, except for like just focus. And somebody else, one of the animators, said it really well, that Kris is everybody's biggest cheerleader, and like he was always championing me to like try other things. If he thought something was great and I wanted to keep trying, he encouraged me to do that, and there was never fear. It was all just encouragement and excitement.
I love that. So my last question is this. This film really resonates with me because it seems like it's about the people that encourage us to be our most authentic selves and to go out and be, you know, to dream big and to pursue our goals. Who are those people for you?
Oh man, I mean, when I was a kid, my parents, I mean, something I thought about with this film as well, like they anything I was interested in, whether it was cartooning or music, like they did whatever possible geographically to put me in situations to succeed. They did whatever they possibly could financially, even when it was very difficult for them to put me in places where I could succeed. And definitely instilled in me this idea that if I want to achieve something, all I have to do is just work as hard as possible, and that like there's nothing you can't achieve with that mentality. Somebody else that really did for me is actually Kobe Bryant, because he was all about like obsessing about your craft, and he encouraged me to look at John Williams the way that he did Michael Jordan, and kind of charged me with like wanting to uh, uh, be as great as possible, just with study. I also think about my other mentors like Ava DuVernay, and um, uh, like there's a composer named Jim Lang that I talked to when I was a kid that was really big for me. Did the score for Hey Arnold and stuff like that. And lastly, I'd say my wife. The fact that she's just making it possible for me to do the things that I do, and making sure that we have a solid base as a family, while I'm like traveling or writing or working and all that stuff. And so having that stability in our home, I think, is something I wouldn't be able to do these things without.
That's a good as a wife, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
You had to say it. I was like, he needs to mention his wife. But thank you so much, and I am excited to see whatever you're working on next.
Really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you, Ashley.